I knew about her from drama school. I had discovered her through some friends, and we all snickered and laughed.
Meryl Streep has spent decades perfecting her craft and has worked with some of the biggest names in Hollywood. From award-winning veterans to rising stars, her filmography spans decades and includes collaborations with some of the most respected actors in the industry. But like any long career, not every working relationship has been completely smooth. Differences in acting styles, creative disagreements, and on-set dynamics have, at times, made certain collaborations more challenging than others. Meryl herself rarely speaks negatively about her co-stars, but over the years, interviews and behind-the-scenes accounts have revealed moments of tension, sometimes subtle, sometimes more pronounced. Today, we're taking a look at 6 co-stars Meryl Streep reportedly found difficult to work with. Let's get into it. 6. Dustin Hoffman. This is probably the most well-documented example of tension in Meryl Streep's career, and surprisingly, it actually happened very early on. When Meryl was cast in Kramer vs. Kramer, she was still relatively new in Hollywood, a rising talent fresh off the theater world, while Dustin was already an established star with a reputation for intense, method-driven performances. From the start, their working styles didn't quite align. Meryl was highly prepared, thoughtful, and deliberate, often collaborating with the director and writers on her character's emotional beats, whereas Dustin was famously improvisational and unpredictable, preferring to discover things in the moment. This clash in approaches created an undercurrent of frustration behind the scenes, with Dustin sometimes pushing beyond what Meryl had anticipated or felt comfortable with. One of the most talked about incidents was Dustin's unplanned slap. He hit her hard across the cheek right before a take, leaving a mark that actually appears in the film. Meryl has called that moment an overstepping of boundaries, saying she didn't expect it and it wasn't agreed upon beforehand. As if that wasn't bad enough, there was another situation where Dustin smashed a wine glass during a scene and then let the broken glass scatter close to her. The incident left shards in her hair, and she hadn't even been warned before filming that shot. But beyond these physical moments, Dustin reportedly tried to provoke Mer emotionally by bringing up deeply personal topics, including references to her recently deceased partner, in ways that went beyond what the script called for. In fact, he supposedly whispered his name during a rehearsal to stir up a raw reaction. Viewers seem to believe that part of the disconnect stemmed from their differing places in life too. Meryl was young, still finding her footing in film and processing personal grief, while Dustin was older, confident in his craft, and sometimes inclined to test boundaries in pursuit of what he believed would enhance authenticity. Meryl had a clear vision for her character and to some extent had rewritten parts of the role to strengthen her portrayal, while Dustin seemed to want to bend the environment around her to fit his own method. Despite the friction, both performances were unsurprisingly powerful. The movie ended up being a huge success, with both actors winning Oscars. The film itself took home Best Picture, but the experience stayed with Meryl as an early lesson in navigating strong personalities in Hollywood. Her stint with Dustin was the moment she learned to balance artistic ambition with personal boundaries in a way she hadn't before. Next up is Anne Hathaway. 5. Anne Hathaway. It's not exactly surprising that Anne Hathaway and Meryl didn't quite get along initially, considering that's precisely the dynamic their characters embody on screen. By the time The Devil Wears Prada went into production, Meryl was already a Hollywood legend, a multi-Oscar winner with decades of experience commanding respect and attention on set. Anne, in contrast, was still early in her career, stepping into what would become one of her most defining roles. She was bright, talented, and ambitious, but she also carried the nerves and uncertainty that come with working alongside someone of Meryl's stature. On set, however, their dynamic wasn't immediately warm. Anne has spoken in interviews about how intimidated she felt around Meryl, And not just because of her fame or experience. She initially got the impression that her co-star didn't like her at all. There was a distance in the way Meryl carried herself, precise, controlled, almost icy, that made Anne second-guess how she should behave, how to move, how to deliver lines. Even small moments, like exchanging a greeting or discussing a scene, felt weighted. For a young actor trying to navigate the pressure of a major studio film, it was unnerving. It wasn't until later that she understood what was really happening. Meryl had made a deliberate choice to remain fully in character as Miranda Priestley, the sharp, emotionally distant editor-in-chief she was portraying. Rather than stepping out of role between takes, joking with the crew, or offering warmth to ease tension, the common Hollywood approach, she maintained that cold, authoritative demeanor. It was an intentional decision designed to preserve the integrity of her performance and keep the energy consistent for Anne, who was often opposite her in pivotal scenes. And it worked. On screen, their relationship feels strained, uncomfortable, and intensely real in a way that defines the entire film. Moments where Anne's Andy Sachs looks vulnerable or unsure resonate, because the audience senses the subtle tension carried over from the actor's real-life interactions. The power imbalance feels authentic, the intimidation feels palpable, and much of that came from Meryl's commitment to her role, rather than any personal animosity. After filming Wrapped, Meryl reportedly turned to Anne and said, "That's the nicest thing I'm ever going to say to you," breaking character for the first time and making clear that the perceived distance had been part of the process all along. It was a quiet but powerful acknowledgement, signaling respect for Anne's work and perseverance. In this case, the tension wasn't personal, it was more of a constructed and intentional tool for storytelling. But for Anne, experiencing it in real time blurred the line between performance and reality. Now, let's move on to The Bridges of Madison County, where Meryl reportedly clashed with Clint Eastwood. 4. Clint Eastwood. By the time Meryl and Clint came together for The Bridges of Madison County, both of them were already firmly established in Hollywood, but in very different ways. Clint had built a reputation not just as an actor, but as a director, with a very specific style. One rooted in economy, instinct, and quiet authority. Over decades, he proved himself adept at getting powerful performances while keeping sets calm, moving swiftly through scenes, and avoiding unnecessary takes. He preferred to trust his actors' instincts rather than rehearse endlessly, famously working with minimal fuss and rarely saying more than was needed. Meryl, on the other hand, approached her roles with an entirely different kind of precision. She is known for deep preparation, immersing herself in accents, internal backstories.
I wanted to just get the specificity of Florence's voice, what it was that really both made people laugh and also drew them.
Emotional beats and nuances that can only be uncovered through meticulous rehearsal and variation. So when these two approaches met on the same set, there was bound to be a bit of friction, or at least an adjustment period. Meryl was understandably surprised by Clint's directing style. Scenes would wrap quickly, sometimes before she felt she had fully explored all the emotional layers she might normally test. The usual back and forth she was accustomed to wasn't there. Instead, Clint's method involved almost complete silence unless something needed correction, leaving Meryl to wonder early on whether she was doing the right thing. Clint didn't say much during the first half of filming, a taciturn presence that left Streep momentarily anxious and unsure. Only later did he explain that he simply didn't talk unless something needed to be changed, not because he was distant, but because his philosophy was to let actors find their own truth once they were prepared. Instead of creating outright conflict, this difference led to adaptation, especially on Meryl's part. She learned to adjust her process to fit Clint's pace, delivering fully formed performances with fewer takes and less verbal direction than she was used to. Her portrayal in the film feels intimate and restrained, almost as if the lack of multiple takes preserved something raw and unvarnished in the emotion. The chemistry between her and Clint's character unfolds slowly and organically, without ever feeling overly rehearsed or artificial. While there's no record of actual arguments or personal conflict between them, it's clear that the duo had to struggle a bit to find the perfect balance between their styles. Over the years, both actors have spoken respectfully about each other's craft, and Bridges stands out as an example of how two very different creative philosophies can coalesce into something deeply resonant. In this case, what could have been a frustrating mismatch instead became a subtle balance, a quiet collaboration that reshaped both their performances and showed how discomfort in the creative process doesn't break the work, it refines it. But can we say the same for Meryl's collaboration with Robert Redford? 3. Robert Redford. When Out of Africa was released, it quickly became one of the most celebrated films of its time. The movie swept the Academy Awards and cemented its place as a sweeping romantic epic. Even better, at the center of it were two of the biggest names in Hollywood, Meryl Streep and Robert Redford. On screen, their chemistry felt effortless. There's a quiet intimacy to their performances, a sense of longing and emotional distance that made the story feel grounded, despite its scale. But behind the scenes, their working dynamic was far more reserved. Unlike some co-stars who build strong personal connections during filming, Meryl and Robert reportedly maintained a certain distance from each other. It wasn't hostile, and there were no public disagreements, but there was a noticeable lack of off-screen closeness. Part of this came down to personality. Robert has often been described as private and somewhat guarded, someone who keeps a clear boundary between his work and personal life. Meryl, while also private, tends to engage more deeply with the emotional layers of a scene, often looking for connection and responsiveness in her co-stars. There was also a difference in how they approached their performances. Meryl was deeply invested in shaping her character, Karen Blixen, down to the smallest detail. She took time perfecting her accent, her posture, even the rhythm of her speech. In fact, she's even spoken in interviews about the level of work she put into making the character feel authentic. Robert, by contrast, brought a more natural, understated presence to his role. His performance as Dennis Finch Hatton relied less on transformation and more on quiet charisma. He wasn't trying to disappear into the character in the same way Meryl was. He was embodying it with minimal visible effort. A difference like that can create an interesting tension, especially in a film that depends so heavily on emotional connection. While one actor is building from the inside out, carefully constructing every detail, the other relies on instinct and presence. It's not exactly the best dynamic, but the result in this case was something that actually worked in the film's favor. The slight distance between their characters, the sense that they never fully belonged to each other, kind of mirrored what was happening off-screen. Their relationship feels restrained, even when it's passionate, as though there's always something just out of reach. There's no evidence that Meryl and Robert actually had any kind of falling out, especially because they remained professional throughout the production. But the tension was pretty evident. Interestingly, the film itself stands as one of the most successful collaborations of their careers. 2. Goldie Hawn. Death Becomes Her was a dark comedy about vanity, immortality, and the extreme lengths people go to preserve youth and status. At its center were three powerhouse actresses, Meryl Streep, Goldie Hawn, and Isabella Rossellini. From the outside, the film reads as a comedic rivalry, with Meryl's character driven by obsession and Goldie's by charm and cunning. On set, that energy naturally carried over in subtle ways. While neither actress has publicly confirmed any major personal conflict, multiple media reports at the time framed their dynamic as competitive, suggesting that tensions occasionally flared as the actresses tried to assert their presence and comedic timing within scenes. Goldie was known for a playful, improvisational style. She often added quips or small gestures to scenes that weren't fully scripted, injecting spontaneity and surprise. Meryl, on the other hand, is quite highly structured in her approach. She meticulously analyzes every line, movement, and emotional beat, crafting each moment with precision. When these two very different approaches intersected, it created moments that could feel slightly unpredictable for everyone involved. Observers and crew members described the atmosphere on certain scenes as electric, not hostile, but charged. Both actresses are intensely professional, and even playful competitiveness could be mistaken for tension by media outlets eager to dramatize events. Still, the differences were noticeable. Timing, delivery, and comedic rhythm sometimes had to be recalibrated to accommodate both styles. This dynamic, however, contributed to the success of the film. The friction between Meryl's control and Goldie's improvisation mirrored the story itself, where characters constantly collide, scheme, and vie for dominance. The competitive energy ultimately enhanced the performances, lending authenticity to the rivalry portrayed on screen. Even though rumors circulated about tension, both actresses have spoken respectfully about each other in interviews over the years. Meryl has praised Hawn's natural comedic timing and ability to light up a scene, while Goldie has acknowledged Meryl's legendary work ethic and dedication. In the end, what some perceived as tension was less a personal conflict and more the product of two strong creative personalities navigating a single set. Finally, we've got Johnny Depp. 1. Johnny Depp. When Into the Woods went into production, Meryl was already one of the most seasoned performers in Hollywood. She had decades of experience navigating ensemble casts, complex storytelling, and emotionally demanding material. She was comfortable carrying a film on her own, yet musicals present a very different kind of challenge.
If there's one good thing about the selfie world and how close in everybody is to everybody, it's that the scales fall from your eyes. We're all just people, and that's...
In musicals, timing, tone, and energy have to be perfectly coordinated. Music is unforgiving. A single beat out of place can throw off the whole scene, so everyone has to be not only technically precise, but emotionally in sync with one another. When you are working with actors whose styles are very different, even small differences can create unexpected tension. Johnny Depp was one of those very different actors. By the time of Into the Woods, he was known around the world for his larger-than-life and often unconventional performances. In roles like Jack Sparrow and Edward Scissorhands, he showed a remarkable instinct for improvisation, for twisting tone and physicality in ways that were surprising and unpredictable. On set, he brought that same instinctive, eccentric energy. He explored characters by experimenting with voice and gesture, making choices that were bold and spontaneous rather than planned. Meryl's approach was almost the opposite. As someone who studies every nuance of a character, every emotional beat, and every musical phrase before stepping in front of the camera, her preparation is deep and methodical. She knows the song inside and out before she sings it, and she knows the emotional logic of every scene before she enters it. This structured style allows her to anchor even the most chaotic of scenes with clarity and power. The contrast between these two approaches was not, at first, a matter of personality clashes, but a matter of process. On a musical set like Into the Woods, where scenes are built moment by moment, and where multiple actors are interacting in tight choreography, improvisation can be beautiful and dangerous at the same time. Johnny's improvisation sometimes meant that Meryl had to adjust her timing and reactions on the fly. Crew members and industry observers have noted that working with Johnny demands patience and adaptability, even for someone as experienced as Meryl. On a set where someone is constantly trying new things, the rhythm of the day can shift without warning. Musicians and dancers have to reset. Camera operators have to reposition. Meryl, with her professional reputation for punctuality and precision, had to find ways to maintain her focus even when the elements around her were unpredictable. While Meryl has never publicly criticized Johnny, insiders who were present during filming describe moments where the energy on set had to be carefully managed to keep the tone of the film from wobbling off course. There was this one moment that has now circulated in interviews and behind-the-scenes conversations. One time, Johnny improvised a line in a musical number that wasn't rehearsed. The music crew was caught off guard, and the sound team had to scramble to match it in playback. Meryl, already in position, had to adjust her vocal delivery in real time while still holding the emotional truth of her character. Moments like that did not lead to visible arguments, yet they required quick thinking and professional grace on her part. Moreover, musicals require a heightened sense of rhythm and synchronization. Actors are not just talking or singing, they are moving, interacting, and communicating through music and dance as part of the narrative. Any deviation from the planned choreography or rhythm can throw off a scene, especially when multiple actors are interacting simultaneously. Johnny's creative spontaneity meant that Meryl had to be ready to respond instantly, adjusting her singing, gestures, and emotional delivery to keep scenes seamless. This was not easy. For many actors, moments like those can feel destabilizing, especially when they are used to having the structure of rehearsal and predictability. Ultimately, the collaboration worked mostly because of Meryl's flexibility. She did not allow the unpredictability around her to disrupt her focus. Instead, she allowed the tension to enhance her performance, making her scenes feel more alive and layered. In the final film, her interactions with Johnny have an electric quality. All of these partnerships are perfect examples of the kinds of challenges Meryl has had to navigate repeatedly throughout her career. Difficult co-stars are not always about personality conflicts. Sometimes they are about finding a way to make different methods work together to create something extraordinary on screen. As we look back at Meryl's remarkable body of work, the theme is consistent. She has worked with actors of every style and temperament. She has adjusted, adapted, and elevated. And in doing so, she shows that great performances are not just about harmony, but about learning to create resonance out of contrast. What do you think of Meryl's list? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe for more videos like this.